All right, welcome to part 3 of the dialogue system tutorial. I'm just going to go ahead and get started right where we left off. So the next thing we're going to want to do is create the behavior tree that will define how the dialogue will flow. So back here in the content folder, right click, and we're going to want to create a behavior tree. So you go to artificial intelligence and select behavior tree. And if you haven't worked with behavior trees before, I'll try to explain them the best I can as we go along, but they're really a topic for another discussion. But at a high level, they're essentially just a graph that lets you define how an AI or a character in your game will behave and what decisions he's going to make. So, you could use it for something like if he sees an enemy in front of him, it'll make him walk towards the enemy. Or, if he's out of ammo, he'll reload. It basically defines the behavior of an AI. But for this case, we're going to kind of repurpose it and use it as a flowchart for how our dialogue system is going to go. And it will make more sense as we actually start using it. So let's rename this to dialogue tree. And I'm going to call it dialogue tree 1 just because you could have many of these in your game. You can make as many of these as you want. So anytime you want to have another unique dialogue between the player and a character, you just create a new dialogue tree and set it up with all the stuff that we're going to be setting up here in a second. I'll show you exactly how to do that. So one thing to know about behavior trees, if you right click and you go to artificial intelligence, you can see right below behavior trees there's something called a blackboard. And what a blackboard is, it basically holds on to information that the behavior tree is going to use. And it lets the behavior tree read and write to those values. So we're going to need one of these. You only need one of these. It doesn't matter how many behavior trees you create. You're only going to need this one blackboard because they're all going to use the same blackboard. So go ahead and create one of these, and we'll call it dialog blackboard. And if we open this up, actually open up the behavior tree first. So you can see if you open up the behavior tree, there's the blackboard tab right next to it. And it looks like it already set it up for me. If it didn't, just go ahead and inside a behavior tree right here, just select the blackboard that we created. But it looks like it already hooked them together for us. So if you click blackboard, it will bring us over to the blackboard tab, which again, it's just this blackboard. It's the exact same thing. It's just a different way of showing it. So inside of here, we want to add a few values. We want to add one for the dialog widget because the behavior tree needs to have access to the dialog widget, which again is just this guy, because it needs to be able to show or hide the speak or reply size boxes, depending on if the player is speaking, depending on if the NPC is speaking or if the player is replying. So it's going to need access to that. So create a new key I just click it. Oh yeah, so click it and then select object because that's the type that it is, and call it dialog widget. And over here on the right for the key type, we want object. And if you expand this, it will ask you for the base class, and we want that to be our dialog widget. So select dialog widget. And then we want one more. So click it again, and we want an integer for the reply index. And so this is going to be a variable that gets set depending on which reply you select. And we can save that. All right, so that's pretty much all we need to do with the blackboard. It's pretty straightforward. So back in the behavior tree tab, we can start defining how the dialogue will go for this specific behavior tree. So like I said before, you can create a behavior tree for every type of unique conversation that you want to have. So this one that we're creating here is just going to be an example of how you'd create one, because we need to create some components and stuff. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. But this part, definitely follow along for the tutorial, but you can then rework this tree and create a bunch of new trees based off of this one as an example to get your dialogue working as you want. So for this one, since it's just an example here, we're going to start out with a sequence node. And what a sequence node does is it basically executes everything below it, so all of its children from left to right, and it stops executing if one of them fails. So it just kind of goes in order. And you can see behavior trees, the execution order is from the top down and left to right. And that'll make more sense once you kind of see it. So you can see it starts at the root, and then it goes down to this node. And then off of this node, we want to start the conversation. So over here, we actually want to create a new task that does the speaking. So I'm going to come up here to tasks at the top and create a new task. And you can see as soon as I do that, it creates a new one for us. We actually want to browse to it, and you can see it created it right here. And I'm going to move this to a tasks folder just to keep it a little bit more organized. So drag this in, and I'm going to rename this to the speak. I'm just going to rename it to speak because this is our speak task. Okay, so if we double click and we open this, in here we can define what we want to happen when this task gets ran. So there's a few functions you can override here on the left. The only one we really care about right now is receive execute AI. So click on that. And this event is going to get called from the behavior tree whenever we call our speak task. So you can see if I drag off this and type speak, you can see our speak task will show up. We can just add that in here for right now. So you can see it starts off sequence, and it goes immediately starts to speak. So that's basically what's happening. So if we come in here again, essentially what we want to do is we want to make sure that our dialog widget is showing the speak size box and not showing the reply size box. So to do that, we're going to want to get access to this dialog widget. This guy. We need access to him. And if you remember, we have a copy of him inside of our Blackboard over here. We have access to our dialog widget. So in here, we really just want to get access to that variable. And to do that, it actually needs to be passed in from the behavior tree. So right here, we need to pass it in. And in order to do that, back in this speak task, we need to create a variable. And it needs to be of a very specific type. Well, let's just give it a name first. So this is going to be our dialog widget. And the type that it needs to be is Blackboard key selector. So we're basically saying, hey, this variable is coming from the Blackboard. And one more thing we need to do is we need to select this little eye right here. So that, and I think we need to click expose on spawn as well. And what that's going to do is it's going to, if you go back to your dialog tree, you can see if we click on speak, and over here on the right, it's exposed this dialog widget. And we can drop down and we can select from the values in our Blackboard. Because if you look, it has dialog widget and has reply index, and those are the exact same variables that are in our Blackboard. But of course, for speak, we want dialog widget, and it's selected that by default because we want to pass that along. So now in here, we'll have access to this. But since this is of type Blackboard key, we can't just immediately start using this as if it's a dialog widget. We need to get it from the Blackboard and tell the Blackboard, hey, this is actually this type of object. So to do that, just drag off of it and say get Blackboard value as object. So that's going to get it as an object. And then we need to cast it to our dialog widget. So cast to dialog widget, like so. And we can do a pure cast because we know it's going to succeed. So now this is a pointer to our dialog widget, which again is this guy. So from here, we basically want to call some function that's going to tell the dialog widget to show the NPC talking. And we don't really have a way to do that yet, so we can add functionality to our dialog widget. So we'll go back to our dialog widget for a second, and back in the graph, we're going to add some events. So let me pull it up on my other screen so I can just copy it. Okay, so we really don't need any of this stuff, so we can just get rid of it. And then inside of here, we want to create 3 events. We want one for speaking, which is the one we were going to call back there. So add custom event. We'll call it speak. And the speak is going to take in the text that you want them to say or the dialogue. So over here under inputs, click this plus and add a text. And this is going to be the text. And then we want another custom event, so add custom event. And this one would be called reply. And this one is going to take in text as well and call it replies, or replies, plural, replies. And since this can be more than one reply, it's going to be an array. So click right here and change it to an array. And the last one we want is an event for exit. So add custom event and call it exit. And from here, we can actually call our onExit event dispatcher that we created earlier. So it just passes it along and says, hey, we're trying to exit. All right, so back here up in our speak function, we'll fill this out first. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. We basically want to take, if you go back to the designer tab, and let's see, currently I have the speak size box hidden. So I actually want to hide the reply size box, and I want to show the speak size box, because this is the one we're currently working with. And these little eyes that hide and show stuff, they're just purely for previewing, just so it's easier to work with. It doesn't actually hide it in the game or anything. But I'm just showing this one since this is the one we're working with. So again, basically what we want to do, when this speak gets called, we want to take whatever text they pass in, and we want to show it right here in place of this text. So in order to do that, if we click on the text over here on the left, we can say is variable at the top, and that will expose it as a variable so that we can edit it in code. So if we compile and save that, and we go back to our graph, you can see on the left here, we now have our speak text as a variable. So we can just drag that in, and we can say set text. And of course, the text that we want to set it to is the text that's passed in. And the last thing we want to do is we want to actually, like I was saying before, we want to make sure that this this speak size box is shown, and we want to make sure that this reply size box is not shown, because if they're shown at the same time, you're going to get something like this where they're on top of each other, and we of course don't want that. So back in the graph, we're just going to create a really simple function here that's going to help us handle this. And it's good. So create a function right here and just call it set dialog state. And we basically want to pass in, is this, is it speech or is it reply? Because, it's either speech or it's reply, depending on if the player is replying or if the NPC is talking. So we could pass in a bool for, speech and start it with true or false, but just to make it a little bit more clear, I'm just going to create an enum real quick. So back in the content directory, we're just going to right click, create a blueprint, and create an enumeration. And we'll just call this dialog state. And in here, we're just going to add 2 entries. So click new twice. The first one is going to be speak. So this is when the NPC is speaking. And the next one is going to be reply. And of course, this is when the player is replying. Okay, so we can save that and close it. And then back in, where were we? We were in our dialog widget. So back in here, in the set dialog state function, we're going to add one of those enums that we just created as a parameter. So click the new parameter button and search for dialog state. And make sure it's not set to an array anymore. Make sure you set it back to a single instance. And we'll call it the dialog state. Okay, so we want to take whatever variable is passed in, promote it to a variable because we want to save a copy of it. And we'll rename it to our dialog state. And then whatever they pass in, we're going to do a switch to see which one it was. So if it's the speak dialog, we want to hide the reply dialog and show the speak dialog. But you can see we need access to those variables over here on the left because we don't actually have access to them. So we can go back and make those variables as well. So click on the speak size box and make it a variable. And click on the reply size box and make it a variable as well. Compile and save. All right, so now back in the graph, we have access to those. So we're going to say the reply size box, we want to set visibility to collapsed because if they're speaking, we don't want to see the reply size box. And we want to take the speak size box and set visibility to this bottom one, which is basically not hit testable, because we want it to be visible, but we don't want it to be hit testable because we don't want to be able to click on it. And then I'm just going to copy this because we're going to do the same thing, but backwards, if it's this one. So instead, we'll change this one to the bottom one, and we'll change this one to collapsed, like so. And that's all we need to do there. This is just a nice little helper function that's going to make our life easier back in the event graph. So we can go back to the event graph, and we can drag in our set dialog state function. And of course, if they're speaking, we want to set it to speak, like so. And that should be that. So now that we have our speak function, or our speak event filled out, of course we still have some more stuff to do here, but we should be able to at least test it. We can go back to our behavior tree, and our speak task, you can see we are passing in, make sure you're passing in the dialog widget. And if we double click on this, we need to finish filling this out now that we have our speak event. So we can drag off of here and say speak. And up here you can see we have an option to call the speak event that we just created. And it's asking for the text. And so that's also one thing we're going to want to pass in to this task is the text that we want them to say. So add another variable, call it text. And we don't want this one to be a Blackboard key. We want this to just be normal text so that you can specify it to whatever you want. And click the little I and hit expose on spawn. And then drag that in like so. And hook that up. And just move this over a little bit so it looks a little nicer. Okay. So now if we go ahead and we run this, I think we might be, oh no, we still need to actually run the Blackboard. So back in the dialog component, we got to do these to-dos real quick. So trying to find the tab on my other page. Okay. So run the behavior tree is what we want to do next. So to run the behavior tree, that needs to be done from the controller, which we create at the beginning. So drag in the AI controller and say run behavior tree. And hook that up like so. And the behavior tree that we want to run is our dialog tree. Where did we create that? Oh, right. We haven't created that yet. I forgot. So inside of here, we need to actually expose the dialog tree so that who's ever using this component can specify it. So we just need to create a variable for that. So create variable. And on the left, just type dialog tree. And the type that we want to make it is a behavior tree object reference. Compile and save that. And for this one, we want to click this little eye icon as well and click expose on spawn so that we'll be able to edit it per instance of MPC. And so this is the behavior tree that we want to use, whichever one they specify. So we're going to run that behavior tree. And if you remember, like I was saying before, behavior trees are pretty much tied hand in hand with Blackboard, so you need to tell it which Blackboard you want it to use. So drag in the AI controller again and say use Blackboard and hook that up. And we can just select the Blackboard from this drop-down list. It should be the only one in there if it's the only one you ever created. So just click on that. And the last thing we need to do is we need to set up our Blackboard so that it has a reference to our dialog widget. Because remember, if you look at the Blackboard, if you look at the Blackboard, the dialog widget, by default, it's not anything. So we need to actually set this value as soon as we start running the Blackboard so that it's set. And to do that, there's a handy little function back in the dialog component. If we drag in if we drag off of the Blackboard, we can say set value, and you'll see it gives us a lot of options here of how we want to set the value. And of course, in our case, it's an object. So we'll say set value as object. And the object we want to pass is our dialog widget. And it's asking for the key name. And the key name needs to match whatever you have specified here. And we've called it dialog widget. So that's what we're going to put. So back over here, I'm just going to right click and say literal name. So we can have a literal name right here that we can just hook up. And we'll call this, or we'll name it dialog widget. So that's basically setting that's just setting this value inside of our Blackboard so that we'll have access to it. Okay, so that is the end of that. And then one more thing we need to do down here, we had it to actually stop the behavior tree. And to do that, you can also do it from the AI controller. And it's a little weird. You say AI controller, and you have to get the brain component. So get brain component, and stop logic. And that's just calling stop logic will stop any behavior trees that are running on that AI controller. And of course, we want to stop the behavior tree if you exit the dialog, because we don't need it to run for any reason. And then it's asking for a reason to stop. I don't think you really need to pass anything here. I don't actually know what this is used for. I think maybe it just prints out somewhere. But you can just type dialog exited. I don't think it actually matters too much. Okay, now that we have our Blackboard running, or sorry, our behavior tree running, I'm just looking over this real quick. I think we can give it a test. So save all, go ahead and click play. If I run up and I click on him, oh, so it says interacted. However, we never actually specified the behavior tree to use. So we should do that real quick. So you can click on the NPC, click on the dialog component. Oh, it's showing the dialog widget. We don't actually want that. So click on the dialog component real quick. Why is it showing that? Maybe this just needs to be set to private. Let me see. Set that to private. Go back to this guy. Compile. There we go. Because we didn't really need that to be shown. We just wanted to see the dialog widget. So, or the dialog tree. So inside of here, we can select the dialog tree that we want this NPC to run. And we can set it to the dialog tree 1. And just to be as a note here, you can also change it. Like if you had 2 of these guys in the scene, I'm just going to copy this guy real quick. Copy him. You can also set it on instances in the world by clicking on him and then over here on the right, selecting it and changing it here. So you can change it in the blueprint or you can change it on an instance of them, which is pretty neat. But we're just going to set it inside the blueprint for a default one. So if we go ahead and we run this now, let's see if it works. Click F. Yeah, okay, so we get something popping up down here at the bottom. You can see our little text boxes popping up. But there's no text in it, and that's because we never actually specified any text inside of our behavior tree. So we can do that real quick. So back in the behavior tree, we'll click on this speech guy, and you can see up here we now have a text field defined. And so we can basically type here whatever we want him to say. So I'm just going to say, actually, let me go to my other behavior tree and copy that one because that one's a little bit better. Okay, so what can I help you with? Question mark. So now we save that, and we go back and we run it, and we click F. You see, what can I help you with? And again, feel free to change the colors. I know they probably don't look that great. I think I made the background a little bit too transparent, but that's the general idea. It says, hey, what can I help you with? But we're actually kind of stuck in this screen at this point because we don't have any way to exit. So we will get to that eventually. For now, just press escape and kill the program. But the cool thing is that we now have this speak event, or this speak task that we can call. We can pass him whatever we want for him to say, and he'll just say it. So the next thing we want to do after he speaks and says, hey, how are you? We want the player to be able to reply. So to do that, just like we created a speak task, we're going to create another task for replying. So come up here again at the top, hit a new task. Again, click browse because we want to move it to this tasks folder. So move it in there. And we want to, actually, you know what? Let's just copy the speak one. It'll be a little quicker. Just delete this one. And just copy and paste and rename it to reply. And go ahead and open up the reply one. So inside of here, we still want the dialog widget to be passed in because we're going to need that. And we want one more Blackboard value to be passed in, which is the reply index. And we're actually going to be filling that out. So go ahead and right click. We can just duplicate this and call this reply index. And in parentheses, I'm just going to put out so that we know it's an out parameter. And I'm going to reorder it so it's up there, just so it's in a nicer order. Okay, so inside of here, we kind of want to do the same thing, more or less, but we want to, instead of calling speak right here, we want to call reply. So drag off of this and say reply, delete that. And you can see our reply node takes in an array of replies, or array of texts. So we're going to want to change this text field over here to an array. And yep, change variable. And I'm going to call it to, or I'm going to rename it to replies as well, just so it's a little bit more clear. And go ahead and hook that up like so. All right, so now whenever they call this task, or whenever this task gets executed, it's going to call the reply function from our dialog widget, and it's going to pass in whatever the replies that were provided to this task are. So we haven't filled out the reply event yet, so go ahead, double click on that, and we'll do that next. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to need to fill out this list view. And if you remember from our designer tab back here, our list view is this guy, and if I hide the speak size box and show the reply size box, you can see it's this guy right here that has a list of all the replies. So we actually want to clear this first and foremost because we want to get rid of any old replies from a previous use. So go ahead and say clear list items. And then we want to loop over these replies and add them one by one to the list. So we'll say for each loop, and I'm just going to drag this around just so it's a little clearer, something like that. And okay, so we're looping over all the replies, and we want to essentially construct a new object to add to this list. Because if we drag in this list and we try to say add item, you'll notice it actually takes in an object. And so we can't just drag in this text as much as I want to into this add item function because it takes in an object. So we need an object that actually holds this text. So we're going to have to create one of those here real quick. But for now, we're essentially going to do something kind of like this. And one thing we want to do before we actually construct the class is, if you remember from my old one, I had it so, I'll just run it real quick so you can see my other project. I had it so if you pressed, or I had it so that the options had like brackets on the left side and the right side. And I did that right here just by simply taking this text and saying format text. And we want to add a pin. Actually, don't do that, Control Z. Just unselect this, and in here we're going to type the open bracket, and then we're going to type a curly bracket, and we're going to type text for the parameter name, another curly bracket, and another bracket. And then when we press enter, you can see it's going to create that text parameter for us. So pretty much whatever we pass here for text, it's going to put right where this text parameter is. And this is what we want to actually add to the list. But again, we can't just add it to the list directly because it's not an object. So we need to create some sort of object that can hold on to our text so that we can pass it to the list. So to do that, come back to content, go back to the dialog system, and we're going to create a new object. This is going to be a very simple object, so don't worry, it's going to be quick. So just right click, say blueprint class, select object at the top, hit select, and we will call this the dialog reply object. And inside of here, we just need one variable for the text, or well, for the reply, so we'll call it reply. And we're going to name it, or we're going to give it text type. And we're going to make it an I so that it's instance editable. And we're going to say expose on spawn so that we can edit it on spawn. And one more thing we're going to need in here, and you'll see why we need this in a little bit, is we want an event dispatcher for Onclicked, because we're going to want to know when one of these items gets clicked. So just make an event dispatcher for Onclicked. We don't have to actually do anything with it yet. We're just going to be calling it later. And that's literally all you need to do with this object, so we can go ahead and close that. And then back here in our dialog widget, in our reply event, back where we were a second ago, we want to construct an instance of that object we just created. So we can say construct object from class, and of course the class we want is the one we just created, I already forgot what it was called, dialog reply object. And so we hook that up like so, and you can see it's exposing the reply text that we told it to, so we can just hook that up like so. For the outer, we can just pass ourselves, so get self, like that. Okay, so this is going to return to us an object that's holding on to the text that we want the item, that we want the list to show. So we can just drag this directly into our add item, like so. And from there, we want to do one more thing with this object. So that Onclicked event we created, we want to bind to it so that we know when an object inside the list gets clicked. So I'm just going to make a little reroute node. And I'm going to say assign Onclicked and hook this up like so. So this little red event down here is going to get called whenever the Onclicked event is called. And of course, if something is clicked, then we're going to want to do something, but I'm just going to put a little to do right here for right now. And we will come back to this in a few minutes. And the last thing we want to do is we want to set the dialog state to reply, because remember up here we set it to speak whenever they call the speak event. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to set it to reply. And if we compile and we save that, we should be more or less good to go. Now, we're not going to be able to click on things yet, but I just want to test it to make sure we're still on the right track. So go back to the dialog tree, and off of the sequence to the right of the speak, we're going to add a reply. And so when you create a reply, you'll see it, and you click on it, you can see up here, these are all of the variables that we have exposed. We have the dialog widget, and you want to make sure it's set to dialog widget. We have the reply index, which is an out parameter. Make sure you change that to reply index, because it needs to match. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's very important. And then you have the reply options. So in here, you can basically specify whatever you want. So I'm just going to click on this like maybe 3 times. We'll have 3 replies. And again, you can write whatever you want in here. I'm just going to follow along with what I had in my example at the beginning. So he asks, you know, what can I help you with? And your replies might be, I'm looking for Bob. Do you know where I can find him? So that's like one of your replies. And the one is, who are you? And another one just could be like, don't talk to me. If I can type, don't talk to me. So you can add as many or as few as you want, but those are all going to get added as replies on the screen. So that is that. If we go ahead and let me check something. Speak. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember. Oh yeah, so if we run it at this point, you'll see, let me just run it real quick. So if I press F and I go up, he's still just saying, hey, you know, what can I help you with? But there's no way to advance it yet, because if I'm clicking and it doesn't actually do anything because we haven't written that code yet. So we need to write code that makes it so when you click on the screen, it advances to the next thing. So to do that, let me think. That is going to be done inside of the dialog widget. Yes. So click on the dialog widget and go back to the graph. And we want to create, or we want to override the on mouse button down event. So override the on mouse button down event. And inside of here, we want to check the current dialog state, because we only want the clicking to advance to the next option if it's if the NPC is currently speaking. If the player is speaking, we want them to have to actually click an option to advance it. So we're going to drag off the dialog state, we're going to do a switch, and we're going to check, you know, we're only going to do anything if he's speaking. So drag off of speaking, and we're going to do a branch. And the condition we're going to check is if it's the left mouse button. So drag off a mouse event and say is mouse button down, and change this to left mouse button, and hook that up to our condition. And so if the left mouse button is down, then we are going to call our on speak finished event that we created a while ago. So drag that in and just say call. So we're basically telling you know, who's ever listening to this event that we are finished speaking and that they can move on to the next step. And it's going to give us a warning here if we don't add a reply or a return. So if you just right click and say handled, we want to reply that we handled the event ourselves, like so. All right, so now that we have this set up, we can go back to our speak task, and we want to bind, because we want to know when this event gets called, this onSpeakFinished event gets called back in our speak task. So we can just kind of scoot this over a little bit, and off of our dialog widget, we can say assign onSpeakFinished, like so. And you can actually drag this. This is kind of a neat little trick. You can drag this event down here that it creates and disconnect it. And I'm just going to name it onSpeakFinished. And then you can just drag off this and say create event. And then you can just select that onSpeakFinished event. So it's a little bit cleaner, so you don't have that giant red line going down there like that. I think it looks a little bit nicer that way. But basically we're just saying, hey, whenever onSpeakFinished gets called, and again, it's just going to get called from right here whenever they, left mouse click. Whenever the onSpeakFinished event gets called, go ahead and call this event down here. And so when this event down here gets called, we want to actually finish the execution of this task so that it moves on to the next task. Because as soon as they finish speaking, we want to move on to the reply. So to do that, we can just say finish execute, and we'll say success is true. So when you call finish execute with success or failure for that matter, it's going to move on to the next thing in the tree. So we can hook that up. One thing we want to do in between these two nodes is we want to actually unbind from the onSpeakFinished event so that we don't keep binding to it every time that this task gets executed. So to do that, we can simply just go ahead and copy these three nodes so that we can get access to the dialog widget. Oops, what did I click? Go ahead and copy these three widgets. No, iTunes, please stop. Copy that, put it down here, and we will say unbind from onSpeakFinished. Make sure you do unbind event from onSpeakFinished so that we can specify the actual event. And of course, the event is actually ourselves in this case. So there we go. So that is everything we need for the speak task. So if we go ahead and run it at this point, we should be able to click past this first section. So if we click somewhere, there we go. So now we're on to the player replies. And of course, we're kind of stuck here. You can see you can kind of click on these buttons, but they don't really do anything because we need to hook that functionality up next. If you were not able to click past it, if this click did not work for you, it's 99% chance that the issue is because in your dialog widget, you did not set up the visibilities correctly. So go back, I think in part 2 where I did the visibilities, and make sure you have them set up correctly. Okay. So now that we have the speak task done, we can do the reply task. Or we can finish up the reply task. So in the reply task, we also want to do something similar here. We want to bind to when the onReplyFinished event happens. So scooch this over and scooch this down a little bit. And we want to say assign onReplyFinish this time, since we're in the reply function, or the reply task, and hook that up. And again, I'm going to disconnect this and drag it down here and call it onReplyFinished. And we'll say call, or what's it called? Create event, yes, create event. And it will be onReplyFinished. And so again, this is just going to call this function down here. And inside of this function, we again want to unbind from the event so that it doesn't get called multiple times. So drag this in and say unbind from onReplyFinish, and hook that up, and hook that up. And the next thing we want to do is we want to set this out variable for our reply index to which one that they selected. So that's going to get passed into us right here. So we can drag in our reply index, get, and to set it, we'll say set Blackboard value as, in this case, integer. So set Blackboard value as integer. And we just kind of drag this around like so. So it looks a little nicer. And finally, we want to call finish execute again so that it proceeds past this like so. File save, save all. Alrighty, so I think that's probably good. Let me go back to my dialog tree. So we got a reply here, and it's got things passed in. I'm just trying to figure out why this didn't work exactly. So we're passing in our replies, go into the reply, and then we pass them into this reply. Ah, yes, I know why. Okay, so we do the for each loop, and then we construct this dialog reply object. So I believe, so we're constructing this dialog reply object, and when one of these gets created, it's going to go and inside of dialog entry widget, if you click on that, we haven't filled anything out in here, and we just need to have a little bit of code in here to handle that. So okay, so we are on the graph tab. So we can delete all this because we don't need it. Over here on the left under interfaces, if you remember from the beginning, since we implemented this user object list entry, it added these functions as options for us to override or implement. And we want this one, on list item object set. And this is basically going to get called whenever an object gets added to our list. So go ahead and right click on this and say implement function. And it's passing us that object that we created. And of course, we know that that object is a dialog reply object. So say cast to dialog reply object. And we want to save this. So right click and promote to variable. And this will be our dialog reply object. And off of this, we can get the actual text that we want to show. And we want to display it right here instead of, this is where the player's response will show. So to do that, again, we need to click on this text, and we need to make it a variable. And I'm going to rename it over here to reply text, just so it's a little bit clearer. File save. And then back over here, we can drag in a reply text, and we can say set text, like so. And the text we want to set, we can get from our object because we know that it has that. So we'll say get text, or maybe it's called, get reply. And we can hook that up like so. Okay, so now we should be able to see the actual reply. So if I go ahead and compile, save, and run this, and we go up to this guy, press F, what can I help you with? If I left click, there we go. You can see our options. You say, I'm looking for Bob. Who are you? And don't talk to me. And we can kind of click on them, but clicking on them doesn't do anything yet. And we also don't have any like hover colors. So let's do the hover colors first because they're actually pretty easy to do since we're using buttons. So back in the designer tab, this reply button, we want to be notified whenever it's hovered over. So if you scroll all the way down here, actually I think you can do it from the graph tab now. If you click on reply button, you can see over here there's some events we can bind to. We want to know when it's hovered. So click on hovered, and we want to know when it's unhovered. So when it's hovered, we want to take the reply text, and we just want to change the color of it. So we'll say set color and opacity. And if you split this, right click and split, it will let you actually just hook up a linear color. So you can either set it right here, or you can just make variables for them. I'm just going to make variables a promote to variable. And this will be the hovered color. And if you compile it, you can then set the default. I'm just going to set it to white. So 1, 1, 1, like so. And we want to do the same thing. So copy this. We want to do the same thing for unhovered, but we want to set it back to our unhovered color. So I'm going to make another variable. Call it default color maybe. And this one I'm just going to compile and set it to that green color, like so. So now if we run this and we go over and we click, you can see whenever we hover over an option, it highlights to give us a little bit better feedback, but clicking it still doesn't do anything. So that's the part we will do next. So handy dandy little Onclicked event. So if you click on reply button, you have the Onclicked event. That's the one we want. So click on that. And inside of here, we want to, because right now we're inside of the dialog entry. We want to tell the widget that we have been clicked. It's a little bit confusing, but essentially what we want to do is we want to get this object. So drag in the dialog reply object, and we'll call its onClick. So call onClicked, and that will get that will go up the pipeline to where it needs to be. Oh, I forgot one thing. So this Onclicked event, just go back to where is it? Did I close it? I think I closed it. Go to the dialog reply object, and this Onclicked event, hold on. Trying to make sure I don't mess this up. All right, yeah, the dialog or the Onclicked event, we need to add a input parameter. So add an input parameter, and we'll call it dialog, or it's a dialog reply object, because we need to pass the one that was clicked. And so this is the clicked object, and compile and save that. And then now back in our dialog entry widget, we want to pass ourselves. Actually, I know it's a little bit weird, but we want to pass ourselves so that we'll, because this is going to get passed up the chain, and we'll need to know who called it. So hook it up like this. Okay, so now we have our hover states, and we have our click states. So if we go ahead and we run it now, come up here, click on these guys, still doesn't do anything, and that's because nobody is listening to this Onclicked event. So back in, let me see, where do I even do this at? Hold on. You can see this is a very complicated, or not complicated system. There's just a lot to it, so I kind of get confused as I'm trying to do it all at once again. Hold on, let me look at my other project. I'm trying to remember exactly where I hooked this up. Ah, yes. Okay, so inside of the dialog widget, we have this to do right here that I almost forgot about. So this event is going to get called whenever a entry or whenever a reply is selected, like whenever the player clicks on the reply. So we want to, why is it still called new param? Sorry, go back to here. Oh, I think we just had to refresh it, maybe. Refresh, there we go. So now it's called clicked object. Okay, so off of here, we want to call the onReplyFinished event. So say call onReplyFinished, and hook that up. And we need to pass the index of which reply was selected. And we can get that by figuring out which index the clicked object is inside of our list view. So if we drag in our list view and say get index from item, and hook that up like so, and hook that up, that will get us the index of which item was clicked. So at this point, if you run it, it's still not going to do anything necessarily. Oh yeah, it did. So it restarted the behavior tree, because what happened was it went here, he spoke, and then the reply showed, and then we clicked an option, and then the behavior tree reset, because if you look inside reply, we finish execute once it was clicked. But we really don't want to just restart the behavior tree immediately. We want to show more options if you click reply. So after a reply node, you're going to want to have a selector node. So drag selector, and off of here, we're going to make use of something called a decorator, which you can kind of see up here. But what a decorator is it's kind of like a condition that checks true or false, and if it's true, it will continue the execution. If it's false, it will stop it. So you can see we have 3 different replies here. I'm looking for Bob. Do you know where he is? Who are you? And don't talk to me. So we're going to need 3 branches over here to handle each one of those replies. So let's start with the first one, which is I'm looking for Bob. Do you know where I can find him? So we know that he's going to speak. So we can create a speak task because we know he's going to do that. So create a speak task, and we'll say something. I think in mine I said, Bob works all day, but if you come back later tonight, you might be able to catch him, right? Something like that. And if you save it, it's going to make it like giant. If you don't want to, it's just because it's showing you the text. If you don't want to see that, just click this little checkbox. It'll hide it. It'll make it a little bit nicer. But of course, we only want him to say that if they selected option 1. So that's where the decorator is going to come in. So if you right click on this and say add decorator, and you want to select Blackboard because we're going to be reading from a Blackboard value, it adds a decorator in front of the speak task. And so up here, I'm just going to rename this to reply 0, just so it's saying it's checking reply for 0. And the Blackboard key that we want to check is the reply index, and we want to check that it's equal to 0. So it's saying if the reply is equal to 0, do this. So now we need to do it for the other 2, so we can just copy this. I'm just going to copy this twice. Or actually, well, yeah, we'll just copy this twice for now. We'll change it in a little bit. So this one, I'm just going to rename it to reply 1. And of course, we want to change this to a 1 as well. And 2. And 2. So now we can change these speak nodes to be different depending on what you say. So if you look back at our replies, we can say, who are you? And maybe, he'll reply something different. So let's just say like, I'm an NPC. And maybe he'll ask you a question, who are you? And our third reply was, don't talk to me. And I think in mine, I just had him say sorry. So we'll just click on it and oops, don't do that. Click on it and we'll just change this to sorry. All right, so now if we go ahead and we run this again, we should be able to see him giving us specific responses. He says, what can I help you with? If I click, we got our options here. If I click, I'm looking for Bob. Do you know where I can find him? I realize I spelled that wrong. They'll say Bob works all day, but if you come back later tonight, you might be able to find him. So that was the correct response. So if I click again, it's going to restart. What can I help you with? I say, who are you? He says, I'm an NPC. Who are you? If I click again, it's just going to restart because we haven't added more to the tree yet. And of course, if we say, don't talk to me, he says, sorry. So that's still working out pretty good. But just to show you like a few more things, so we want to be able to actually exit it. That's probably the first thing we should do. That's really the last task we need to make is an exit task. So you can actually exit out of the dialog tree. And we want to do that if you say, don't talk to me. We're just going to have him say sorry, and then it's going to exit. So to do that, you can create something called a sequence. So type sequence, and we can hook this up like that. And we can drag our reply to over here so that we can move it over there. And we can just hook this up like that. So now it's going to do a sequence if reply to is true. It's going to do, first it's going to speak, and then it's going to exit. So we need to create a task for exit. And it's actually going to be pretty straightforward. So come up here, we're going to create a new task again. And we want to select BTT task blueprint base as the base. And then go back to browse, move it to the tasks folder. And we'll call it exit. And inside of here, again, we want to override the receive execute AI. And we want it to take in the dialog widget again. So dialog widget. And this is a Blackboard key selector. And just like we did before, we're going to drag in the dialog widget. Say get Blackboard value as object. And we're going to cast to our dialog widget and make it pure cast. And we want to call exit, which we've already written this function. If you remember, we double click on this real quick. Exit simply just calls our onExit event. And that's what we want to do. And so we can hook that up. And then finally, we want to, again, call finish execute. So finish execute and pass success. And make sure that you select the little eye here and you click expose on spawn. And then back on our dialog tree, we can say exit. So this way they are going to speak and say sorry, add a period, and then it's going to exit and make sure dialog widget is set for the dialog widget. So if we go ahead and run this, we'll test this out real quick just to make sure we didn't mess it up. If we press F, it says, what can I help you with? And I say, don't talk to me, he'll say sorry, and then if I click, you can see I now am back to free, walking around again, and the dialog tree has gone away. If I go up and talk to him, it restarts from full. If I click on one of the other options, he says his line, and then it restarts. And so that seems to be working out pretty good. So at this point, like, we're pretty much like technically done. But I just wanted to like keep going a little bit further with this dialog tree, just to show you how you would, make more advanced dialogues. But really, this structure is all you need to make, however many dialogues you want. It's just a combination of speaks and replies, and then, checking which reply it is. But for example, because in the one that I had it a little more advanced than this. If you selected the second option, which is who are you, he says I'm an NPC, and then he asks again, he asks you who you are. So in that case, if we wanted to expand this so that you can answer him again, we would just change this from a task to a sequence. So we can right click and say sequence, and we'll hook that up, and we'll drag our reply decorator on there. So now this is our reply one option, and we're going to have him speak. And so he's going to say, I'm an NPC, who are you? And then we're going to be able to reply again. So I'm just going to copy this reply node up here and drag it down. So we're replying. Really important. See, for some reason, whenever you copy these things, it changes this back to the wrong thing. Make sure you set reply index to reply index, or otherwise you're going to have problems. And then again, you can reply, however you want. So you can say, I'm the player, exclamation point. Or you can say, if I tell you, I'll have to kill you. I'll just do one more. I'm not telling you. Goodbye. And again, it doesn't have to be 3. It can be 4. It can be 6, 2, 1, however many you want. And again, just like we did before, after you have a reply, you should have a selector to select which one or to check which one the player selected. So we'll do selector, and we'll do another speak, and we'll need to add a decorator to this. So add decorator, blackboard, and we'll call it reply 0. And we want it to be the reply index equal to 0. And we'll just copy this 3 times again. So these are all our different replies. And we need to update the decorators so that they match. So this is 1 and 1. And this is 2 and 2. And so let's see, our replies was I'm the player. So maybe, I think in mine I said, I guess that makes, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense anymore because I changed the dialogue. I'll just say nice to meet you. Because it really doesn't matter what you put here. It's just, for whatever. And then I think the second time he says, if I tell you I'll have to kill you. So we'll just reply, okay, ... Never mind. And in this one, he says, I'm not telling you goodbye. So in this case, you might want to exit instead of speaking. So maybe we'll just want to exit. So we'll just say task, or we'll just say exit. And we'll drag our reply over there instead, and just get rid of this one. So now if you say goodbye, it just immediately exits. Make sure I did this correct. Reply 0, 1. Oh, I forgot to change this to a 1. Yeah, just make sure you get all these little numbers set up correctly. Just make sure you at least test it one time before you ship your game to make sure it runs the way you want, because sometimes you can accidentally mess it up a little bit. So if we go ahead and run, and we go talk to him, what can I help you with? Say, who are you? He says, I'm an NPC, who are you? Now if we click, you can see we have a whole new set of options. I can say I'm the player, and it says nice to meet you, and then it restarts. Say it again, who are you? Who are you? Did I tell you I have to kill you? Okay, never mind. And if we go with the last option, I'm not netting you. Oops. I'm supposed to say I'm not telling you goodbye. Then it just exits immediately. So yeah, that's pretty much how we can build trees. And you can build these trees however you want. Obviously, come up, pretty much as advanced as you make them. You might have the need for more features in your game. Like, I tried to keep this tutorial as simple as possible because it was already kind of confusing, but I really wanted to show a good way to make a dialogue system because some of the other ones I showed really were not very robust, but I finally figured out a way that I am really happy with, that I think is a really robust and really dynamic and reusable and super easy to use system. Because like I showed you at the beginning, you can just come up to any object in your game and just add the dialogue component and just make sure that it generates overlaps events and specify whatever dialogue you want it to have. And just like that, you can talk to this thing. So it's like a super easy way, once you have it working, to create a dialogue system for your game. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Trying to think if I forgot anything. Hopefully not. Obviously, I didn't make it look super amazing. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that, just in the interest of time. But hopefully you guys understand just exactly like how powerful this is, because you can just copy this guy. That didn't work. Copy this guy and give him a totally different dialogue tree than the other guy simply by just changing it right here to a different one. But anyways, if you enjoyed the tutorial, please leave a like. I spent a lot of time on this one trying to get it like as easy to use as possible, and subscribe. Thank you.